ever feel like, you're kind of stranded at work? Like on a solo mission. Like you're the only one who can actually get things done right.
Hmm.
You might be caught in something called Glaikitia, and it's more common than you might think.
It's so true, and it's fascinating.
Yeah.
We're just used to celebrating that lone hero in the workplace, the one who's always burning the midnight oil.
Right.
But, like, what if that go-it-alone attitude is actually kind of holding everyone back?
That's what I find so interesting about this deep dive. We're using Suram's book, Office Epidemics,
Yes.
to unpack this whole Glaikitia thing.
Yeah.
And they start with this story that I think a lot of us will relate to about Ritu, the diligent languor.
Oh, yeah, Ritu.
Yeah.
The classic colleague who's, like, always swamped, convinced she's the only one who can actually meet those, like, sky-high standards. She's dedicated, hardworking, and totally isolating herself. And the thing is, she doesn't even realize it.
Which is basically Glaikitia in a nutshell.
100%. It's that tendency to just retreat into this, like, silo of solo work. You shun collaboration because of pride, a need for control, or maybe you just straight up don't trust other people to do it right.
Oh, totally.
It's like the dark side of that whole if you want to go fast, go alone mentality.
Yeah. And haven't we all felt that pressure at some point? To just power through a project on our own.
All the time.
You even kind of take pride in being the go-to person.
For sure. But that African proverb, right? If you want to go far, go together. That's where Glaikitia really trips us up.
Yeah.
Because it creates this illusion of efficiency,
Yeah.
Like, you think you're being super productive.
Right.
But secretly, you're undermining the whole team's success.
It's not even just about productivity, though, right? Suam points out how this whole lone wolf approach actually impacts our colleagues in these surprisingly negative ways.
Oh, absolutely.
And they use these examples of Ravi, Priya, and Nisha all dealing with the fallout of Ritu's Glaikitia.
Yeah, it's like this ripple effect.
Yeah.
So Ravi, he feels super frustrated all the time because he never gets to actually contribute any of his ideas. And then Priya, she's worried about Ritu burning out, but she's also kind of hesitant to, like, step in,
Yeah.
And then there's Nisha. She feels completely shut out, like she doesn't even know what her role is supposed to be anymore.
It makes you wonder, how many times have we, without realizing it, been Ritu in our own workplace?
All the time.
Or even been, like, on the receiving end of that dynamic and
Yeah.
just not even realize that there was a name for what was going on.
Right. That's why it's so important to have a way to actually identify Glaikitia when you see it, to recognize the signs, like when someone always refuses help, or they're always working late, or if the team morale just seems kind of off.
Right.
These are all signs that, hey, maybe something needs to change here.
And this is where I really appreciate that Suram gives us this self-assessment.
Yes. It's so helpful.
They don't just throw all this information at you. They give you these practical tools so you can reflect on your own work habits. They ask things like, do you find it difficult to delegate tasks? Or do you frequently feel overwhelmed even though you're working crazy long hours?
I love those questions.
Yeah.
It helps you honestly figure out, like, okay, am I doing this Glaikitia thing?
Exactly.
And if you are, it's like the first step to actually growing and having a more collaborative, successful work environment.
Because once you acknowledge that Glaikitia is actually a thing, whether it's in yourself or in someone else, you can start to do something about it.
Exactly.
And Suram gives us this really powerful tool called the SHARE framework.
So we've identified Glaikitia, right? We see those telltale signs.
Yeah.
We're feeling the impact.
Right.
But now the big question is, how do we actually, like, shift gears?
Yeah, how do we go from me to we?
Exactly.
Because, I mean, knowing about it is one thing.
Right.
But how do you actually cure Glaikitia, both in yourself and in the people around you?
Well, Suram had a really interesting point about this. They said, try to remember what it felt like to be on the receiving end of Glaikitia.
Oh, interesting.
Like, think back to a time when you felt stifled or overlooked because someone was stuck in that solo trap.
Yeah, it's like that feeling of being, like, stuck on the sidelines, watching someone else hog the ball. You want to contribute,
Yes.
but you don't even know how to get in the game.
Exactly. And recognizing that feeling, both in ourselves and in others, I think that's a really powerful motivator for change.
Okay, so how do we turn that motivation into action? Because, Suram is all about giving us those practical steps.
Totally. And they actually emphasize that it doesn't have to be this huge, overwhelming thing. It's not about, like, overhauling your entire work style overnight. Sometimes the most effective changes start really small.
Okay, so, like, what's a small change that someone could make?
Well, instead of trying to tackle absolutely everything solo, just pick, like, 1 or 2 tasks that you feel comfortable delegating.
Okay, so instead of spending all night formatting that presentation, you ask a teammate to, like, lend their design skills.
There you go. It not only lightens your load, but it lets your colleague actually showcase their strengths. It gives them a sense of ownership over the project.
And those small collaborations, they can really build momentum.
They do.
Suddenly, you're not just silently working in your own little silos anymore. You're actually, like, communicating, bouncing ideas off each other, maybe even having a few laughs along the way.
And that's where the magic really happens. When we embrace those collaborative
Yeah.
moments, the brainstorming sessions, those quick chats by the coffee machine,
Yeah.
we tap into something so much bigger than what we could ever do alone.
You're talking about collective intelligence, right?
Yes, exactly. That idea that when you bring all these diverse perspectives, these different experiences together, that's when you unlock a whole new level of creativity and problem solving.
Okay, but to really tap into that collective intelligence, we have to, like, shift our mindset. It's no longer I have to do it all. It's how can we achieve this together?
Yes, 100%.
But that's got to be tough, right? Especially in a work culture that's always praising the individual achiever, the one who pulls all-nighters and, like, single-handedly saves the day.
Oh, absolutely. It can be so ingrained. And that's why Suram talks about the importance of celebrating team wins, shifting the focus away from individual accolades and really spotlighting shared successes.
Because when you celebrate a win as a team, you're not just acknowledging the outcome, you're saying, like, hey, everyone's contribution mattered here.
Exactly. You're basically creating this positive feedback loop where collaboration just breeds more collaboration. And that's where real change starts to happen.
So we're not just talking about, like, curing Glaikitia on a personal level. We're talking about changing the very culture of our workplaces.
100%. It's about fostering this culture that truly values teamwork, knowledge sharing, that mutual support system. And it all starts with us, making that conscious choice to break free from those solo tendencies and embrace the power of we.
So we've talked about all these individual steps. You know, delegating, collaborating, celebrating those team wins.
Right.
But how do we make sure this whole we mentality actually sticks? Like, how do we go beyond these one-off actions and actually create a workplace culture that really, truly embraces collaboration?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to, intellectually get the whole teamwork thing,
Right.
but to actually embed it
Yeah.
in the very DNA of an organization,
Right.
that's a whole other story.
Totally. And thankfully, Asurum gets that, and they give us these really concrete strategies for transforming not just individual habits, but, like, the systems and structures that can sometimes make those go-it-alone tendencies even worse.
Totally. And honestly, one of the most impactful things we could do is actually pretty simple. And it's about reframing the language that we use.
Oh, interesting.
Because words really matter, right?
Right.
The way we talk about work, the way we praise achievements, it all adds up.
So, like, give me an example.
So instead of praising someone for being a hero, because they pulled an all-nighter to finish some project solo, you could say something like, imagine how much more we could achieve if we shared the load from the start.
Ooh, I like that.
It's just subtly shifting that narrative. It's not about individual glory anymore.
Right.
It's about that collective achievement.
I love that.
And you can use this new language everywhere. Performance reviews, team goals, even just how you celebrate milestones.
Okay, so instead of just, like, zeroing in on individual targets,
Right.
we could have team-based incentives that actually reward collaborative efforts.
Exactly. Because when you directly tie recognition and rewards to teamwork, you're sending a clear message.
You're saying this is what we value.
Exactly. It's like rewiring the operating system of your workplace.
So I love that analogy.
You're moving away from that default setting of every man for himself.
Right.
And moving towards something so much more collaborative, more fulfilling.
It's funny because it makes me think when we started this conversation, we were talking about how Glaikitia can be like an epidemic.
Right.
But what we're really talking about is creating a workplace culture that's more like an antidote,
100%. It's about recognizing that we don't always have to go it alone.
Right.
And we can achieve so much more when we embrace the power of that collective we.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. Thank you so much for, like, walking us through all of this.
It's been my pleasure. It's such an important conversation to have.
It really is. For anyone listening, remember the story of Ritu, that diligent languor. And as you go through your own workday, challenge yourself. Challenge those go-it-alone tendencies because they can be so ingrained. But embrace the power of collaborating with the people around you. Never underestimate what you can achieve together.